Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a straight shot into the abyss. We're plunging directly into the cinematic universe of the platform franchise.
El Hoyo.
El Hoyo, and its prequel, El Hoyo 2. And I want to be clear from the top. You should forget about this being just a horror movie. Forget a simple philosophical thought experiment. We are treating these films as a singular, brutal, and intellectually aggressive text. It's a text that serves as a perfect and horrifying mirror to our contemporary socioeconomic structure.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We're not just watching a movie here. We're performing a kind of political autopsy.
Right.
What this franchise gives us is the Vertical Self-Management Center, the VSMC.
Right.
And it is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, it is arguably the most perfectly designed spatialization of socioeconomic violence ever put on screen.
It's the architecture. The architecture is the argument.
It is. It's a brutalist tower. We're told it's 333 levels deep, 2 prisoners per level, and it operates as this panopticon of class warfare where everyone is watching everyone else.
That's the key distinction, right? This structure isn't just a background. It's not just a set piece. It's a rigorous political ontology. It literally defines existence through its verticality. Your position in that physical space dictates your entire moral framework, your caloric intake, and ultimately your life expectancy.
And that perfect verticality, it's designed to facilitate one thing.
What's that?
A direct, grotesque, and frankly vicious satire of one of the most pernicious economic ideas of the last 50 years.
Trickle-down theory.
Trickle-down theory. The core mechanism is a gastronomic horror, which is why it hits you with such a visceral force. You see this lavish feast prepared with meticulous, almost clinical precision up at level 0.
Beautiful food.
Gorgeous food. And it descends level by level through the whole. Now, the premise of trickle-down theory, as we all know, asserts that economic benefits given to the wealthy, in this case the upper levels, will eventually flow down to enrich everyone else.
And the film just literalizes the absurdity of that idea in the most brutal way possible. Yeah. They literally spit on the food as it goes down.
Where is that?
The perfect metaphor for our economy.
It is the perfect metaphor. Because by the time that feast, that symbol of, overwhelming abundance and potential, reaches, say, level 100, it's unrecognizable.
It's not even food anymore.
It's not sustenance. It's a degraded, disgusting admixture of leftovers, spit, and, frequently broken glass, which is added by people who just want to assert some kind of dominance or just express their nihilistic rage.
Right.
So this is a visceral, gut-punch representation of the degraded resources and opportunities available to the lower classes in any hyperstratified, unequal economy. The very physics of the pit expose the fallacy that the market, or some supposed invisible hand, will allocate resources efficiently, or, more importantly,
altruistically.
Altruistically, yeah. The structure itself mandates that the platform allocates resources based purely on hierarchical privilege. Nothing else matters.
And so when we look at this whole franchise, both the prequel and the sequel, we have to frame it as a closed-loop historical text. It's a cyclical tragedy. Because the two films together, they don't just critique one system. They critique the utter futility of political extremes. Right.
So if we look at the Platform 2, the prequel, it shows us the absolute horror of totalitarian enforced order.
The law.
Law. It's a world of enforced solidarity.
Yeah.
You could call it a kind of extreme fascism or communism where the state enforces virtue through terror and dogma. The law is absolute, but the method of enforcement it's savage.
And then you get the Platform, the sequel, which shows us the complete inverse. It's the horror of unbridled libertarian individualism.
Anarchy.
Pure anarchy. Late-Stage Capitalism.
Yeah.
And what you see is that systemic scarcity creates a war of all against all. So neither extreme works. The pit, the structure, that's the constant.
The structure is the constant.
And that constant guarantees that both utopian order and radical freedom will inevitably collapse into savagery. It proves the problem is the architecture itself, not the political flavor of the day you try to apply to it.
The cycle is the message. And any hope you have for change is just an illusion.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We are treating these films as a mirror that shows us exactly what we become when the structure guarantees our failure. We're going to deconstruct the cold economic mechanics, the philosophical collapse of idealism, the rise of tyranny in the name of virtue, and the sheer banality of the administrators above. Get ready, because it's absolutely brutal. So let's start at the first layer, the physics of deprivation. the fallacy of the invisible hand.
Right.
Because if this whole thing is a critique of a kind of economic theology, then we have to recognize the cruelest irony of all right up front.
Which is?
Violence is completely manufactured. It's not real. It's artificial scarcity designed specifically to break the human will.
Exactly. The administration, residing in the clinical pristine perfection of level 0, provides enough food to feed every single one of the 666 prisoners.
That's 333 levels, 2 people each.
Exactly. They could all eat if consumption was strictly limited to caloric necessity. This isn't a starving community in the middle of a famine. This is a community where the distribution model is explicitly, intentionally designed for failure.
So the problem isn't a lack of total resources.
Not at all. The problem is the structure and the psychological behavior it incites, especially in the upper strata.
In that model, it just immediately poisons the psychology of the people at the top. I mean, think about it. The upper levels, say levels 1 through 50, they don't just eat to sate their hunger. They gorge themselves.
They gorge.
And they do it out of this profound, paralyzing fear of the fall.
That is the psychological masterstroke of the entire film. Proximity to abundance doesn't create generosity. It doesn't create altruism. It creates frantic, aggressive hoarding.
Because you know your position isn't permanent.
Precisely. If you are on level 4 this month, the central, inescapable thought in your mind is, next month I could be on level 200.
And you remember what it was like on level 200.
Or you can imagine it. So knowing that your status is temporary, the immediate, and you have to say, the rational behavior is maximization of current gains.
Yeah.
You have to assert your dominance through gluttony. You're literally cementing your high-status identity while you can, because the inherent volatility of the pit guarantees your privilege will evaporate in 30 days.
And this instability, this baked-in uncertainty, it leads us directly into game theory.
Oh, absolutely.
Specifically, the prisoner's dilemma, which I think perfectly models why cooperation, which is the only real path to survival, is systematically doomed from the start.
It is doomed. The pit is just a giant 333-person prisoner's dilemma. And the dilemma dictates that 2 or more rational agents who can't communicate, can't coordinate, can't establish any lasting trust, they will inevitably choose a suboptimal outcome for the whole group.
Even if it hurts them in the long run.
Even if it hurts them. So the cooperative choice, which is rationing the food to 1 measured plate per person,
Yeah.
that's what economists would call the Nash equilibrium. It leads to mutual survival.
But let's walk through the actual decision-making process. Let's say you're an inmate on level 50.
Right.
If you choose to cooperate, if you limit yourself to a small, reasonable ration, you are betting your life, literally, on 332 other prisoners doing the exact same thing.
Right.
But if even one person above you, just one person on level 49 defects and gorges, then your sacrifice on level 50 was completely pointless. You're going to starve anyway.
You starve anyway. Precisely. So the dominant strategy for the individual is always defection. It's to gorge yourself immediately.
Why?
Because gorging is the only guarantee of individual survival in that specific moment. Think it through. If everyone else rations, you gorge and you survive. If everyone else gorges, you gorge and you survive longer than you would have otherwise.
It's the only rational choice in an irrational system.
The system breeds this systemic lack of trust. It makes coordination impossible. It makes altruism an illogical, suicidal gamble.
And the administration guarantees this. They guarantee the lack of trust through what we can call the volatility multiplier.
The monthly randomization?
The monthly randomization of levels. It is a market crash simulation every 30 days. If the rich knew they would stay rich forever, if you were permanently on level 1, maybe, just maybe, you could afford the philosophical luxury of charity.
Perhaps. But because their status is so volatile that uncertainty makes any long-term social contract impossible to form, why would you invest energy in forming a cooperative bond with the person on level 3 if you know that in 30 days you might be on level 300 and they might be on level 2?
Right. There's no long-term benefit.
None. The volatility prioritizes only short-term gains. Immediate survival, immediate gluttony. It destroys any possibility of long-term social stability. The pit is literally a Skinner box. It's an experimental apparatus designed to chemically strip away our social conditioning and reveal the self-preserving monster that lies just beneath the polite veneer of civilization.
And if that's the economic logic of it, then the next layer that's so fascinating is the commodification of existence itself. We see this so acutely in Platform 2. Each prisoner is forced to choose 2 things. One personal item and their favorite dish. In the total absence of freedom, in the absence of dignity, what you consume, what you claim as yours, that becomes who you are.
The fetishization of the specific food dish is a brilliant, scathing parody of consumer identity and property rights. Think about Parampion's croquettes or Zamiatin's pizza.
Or the panna cotta.
Or the panna cotta. Think about the violence that erupts when someone violates that specific dish, when they eat the wrong croquette or the one immaculate panna cotta. The violence is often completely disproportionate to the actual caloric theft.
It's not just about the calories, is it? It's about the violation of a principle. It's a violation of property.
Yes, that's it. The system has elevated the sanctity of property, the specific requested meal, above the sanctity of human life, the starving person one level below.
And that is the core savage critique of late-stage capitalism right there.
It is. Property rights are protected fiercely. They're defended by the structure, by the administration. Meanwhile, human life, especially laboring life or imprisoned life, is completely disposable. The system acknowledges your right to a specific brand of croquette, but it completely disregards your right to basic sustenance. It institutionalizes the idea that entitlement to a unique, specific item is more important than universal survival. So if the economic structure is deliberately designed to foster scarcity and distrust, what does that structure then do to the human mind, to our philosophy?
Yeah.
This moves us directly to our second section, the war of all against all, Hobbes versus Rousseau. We're really analyzing the core anthropological conflict within these sources.
And the franchise gives us the ultimate Hobbesian figure. It has to be Trimagasi.
Oh, without a doubt.
The cynical, pragmatic veteran who introduces Goring and us to the pit's brutal realities. I mean, Thomas Hobbes, writing in Leviathan, defined life in the state of nature as solitary, poor, nasty, British, and short.
That sentence is literally the pit's mission statement.
It's written on the wall.
It is. Trimagasi operates on pure, unadulterated pragmatism. He has zero illusions about human goodness or the potential for altruism. His chosen item, the samurai plus knife, it's not just a tool, it's his entire political philosophy made manifest.
Violence is the only currency.
He understands that violence, or at least the threat of it, is the only reliable currency in this realm. He's the pure egoist, acting solely and, you could argue, rationally for his own self-preservation, even if that means cannibalism, even if it means binding his own cellmate to the bed.
And he just encapsulates his entire thesis in one line when he tells Goring, solidarity is a luxury only the rich can afford. Meaning, if you are not starving, if the structure is temporarily favoring you by putting you on a high level, then sure, you can afford to entertain these high-minded moral ideas.
You could talk about sharing.
You can talk about sharing, but the moment your stomach is empty, those moral ideals just evaporate, and they reveal the fundamental biological drive for survival that was underneath all along.
And this brutal, undeniable realism contrasts so sharply with Goring and Imogweri. They are the Rousseauian idealists.
Right.
Jean-Jacques Rousseau believed that humans are naturally noble, the so-called noble savage, and that we are corrupted only by civilization, by property, by society's constructs.
And you see this in their items. Goring enters the pit with a copy of Don Quixote. It's the ultimate symbol of intellectual idealism. He believed he can reason with the system, or maybe even shame the people in it into operating better.
And then there's Imogweri, the former Level Zero employee.
Yeah.
She brings her small dog,
Her
dachshund. She believes she can induce what she calls spontaneous solidarity through gentle persuasion and a kind of naive humanism. And we see very clearly that both of them fail catastrophically.
The pit just deconstructs Rousseau's theory piece by piece. The state of nature in the pit, stripped of civilization, stripped of security, does not revert to nobility. It reverts instantly and brutally to savagery, to murder, and to cannibalism. Imogweri's suicide is the ultimate heartbreaking admission of this failure. She believed in the system enough to work for it for 25 years.
She was an administrator.
She was. She thought the pit only went to 200 levels. She was a neutral functionary in her own mind.
Her belief in humanity, symbolized by her dog, was a necessary philosophical shield. It was a defense mechanism she built to protect her own conscience from the reality of bureaucratic complicity.
And when she finally witnesses the pit for what it really is, when she smells the blood and sees the true depth and the behavior it creates, she just can't survive the cognitive dissonance. Her idealism collapses, and she collapses right along with it.
And Goring's tragic trajectory is maybe the most devastating indictment of all. He starts as a committed pacifist, he's an intellectual, he's determined to achieve a moral goal, rationing the food to save the people on the lower levels.
A noble goal.
A noble goal. But to enforce his moral goal, what does he have to do? He has to adopt Trimagasi's methods, he has to use the Hobbesian knife,
He becomes a murderer. He starts stabbing people, terrorizing those who refuse to cooperate with his plan. He violently enforces his version of morality.
Which, in the end, just proves Trimagasi's worldview was correct all along.
It does.
Moral convictions are incredibly fragile social constructs. They disintegrate instantly under the systemic pressure of hunger. You can bring a book into the pit, but you will very quickly realize that the knife is the only language the pit truly respects.
So the whole franchise becomes this bleak, materialist commentary on philosophy itself. We watch as the object symbolism reinforces this.
The knife, which is violence and pragmatism, consistently overpowers the book, reason and idealism, and the dog, which is love and naive humanism.
The system is just so effective that it forces the idealist to become the tyrant in order to achieve any semblance of order.
And that's the ultimate horror, isn't it? When your stomach is empty, your mind follows the blade. You become the very thing you hated in order to fight it.
And that transition from idealism into violence, I mean, that sets us up perfectly for the third layer of this thing. Order is tyranny. We've thoroughly dissected the chaos of, unbridled libertarian capitalism in the first film. Now, let's execute the instruction and talk about the prequel, the Platform 2, and how it's this searing critique of totalitarianism.
It's absolutely vital to recognize that the anarchy-goring experiences was likely preceded by a period of incredibly rigid enforced order.
This is the era of the loyalists.
The loyalists, or the anointed ones, and they enforce the law. And the law isn't just about rationing. It's incredibly specific.
Yes.
Prisoners can only eat the specific dish they requested upon entry. So if your chosen dish was tuna, you may only eat the tuna, nothing else.
So on the surface, that almost sounds like a kind of utopian socialist idealism, right? It ensures variety. And theoretically, if everyone just sticks to the rule, resources are distributed equitably.
Theoretically. But the film shows us, in no uncertain terms, that enforced solidarity, enforced virtue is just tyranny under a different name.
How so?
Because to maintain this delicate system of mandatory virtue, the loyalists have to utilize extreme, disproportionate violence. And the face of that tyranny is a man named Dagen Babi.
Dagen Babi.
And you have to compare him directly to Maximilien Robespierre during the French Revolution's reign of terror.
Okay.
Robespierre famously argued that terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, inflexible. It is an emanation of virtue.
And Dagen Babi is the perfect reflection of that. He enforces the law not out of some love for his fellow prisoners, but out of a dogmatic, ideological purity.
Absolutely. Anyone who deviates, anyone who eats the wrong dish,
Yeah.
anyone who tries to hoard is a heretic. They are an enemy of the collective, and they must be punished.
And the detail of his punishments is crucial to understanding the horror of this kind of enforced order.
Oh, it's medieval. We're talking about literal amputation, cutting off the arms of the so-called barbarians who dared to steal or eat the wrong meal. And this is done to physically mark them as enemies of the state, ensuring that even if they move levels the next month, their crime is visible to everyone.
And it gets worse.
It gets worse. The crucifixion, binding offenders to the platform itself, ensuring they are eaten alive as the platform descends through the levels.
So he weaponizes the very architecture of survival.
Exactly. He turns the system's central mechanism into a public torture device. Dagen Babi, just like Robespierre, truly believes that his moral superiority justifies any atrocity required to maintain his vision of collective order. His system is inherently self-destructive because it requires a constant, brutal war against anyone he deems impure.
And the irony is that the loyalists, and Dan Babi himself, they rely on this master myth.
The story of the Messiah.
The Messiah who survived a month without any food, sacrificing his own leg to feed others. This mythologizing of radical self-sacrifice. It's a classic tool of totalitarian control.
It doesn't even matter if the Messiah ever really existed. The story creates a religious fervor that stifles any dissent.
The law becomes a holy text.
A holy text, and deviation becomes heresy, punishable by death or by mutilation. It's a critique of how political movements, even ones that start with the purest of intentions, can morph into these dangerous cults where dogma just completely overrides pragmatic humanism and basic mercy.
And this relentless internal conflict, this war within the pit, leads us to the critical sociological concept that, for me, is the most frustrating, rage-inducing part of the entire franchise.
Lateral violence.
Lateral violence, or horizontal violence. This is what breaks your brain. It's the sociological dynamic where oppressed individuals who are unable or maybe just unwilling to attack their true oppressor, the administration at level 0, they direct all of their aggression, all their hatred toward their peers. their neighbors, the people closest to them.
The war between the loyalists and the barbarians, or just the everyday fighting between prisoners on level 6 and level 7, it's all entirely lateral.
They're all victims.
They are all victims of the exact same system. They all suffer the same structural violence. They are fighting over scraps of spit-covered food, and yet they slaughter each other for it.
And the loyalists? They act as class traitors, don't they? They're like capos in a concentration camp. They're enforcing the master's rules upon their fellow slaves, believing that their adherence to the law grants them some kind of temporary moral status.
They're internalizing the structure. They're doing the administration's dirty work for them.
And this is the profound, devastating question that the film forces every one of us to confront.
Go on.
Why do we hate the guy below us more than the guy starving us?
And the answer the film gives is chilling. It's chilling, and it's tragically relevant to our own society. Because the guy above you is untouchable.
Abstract.
He's abstract, powerful, remote. A faceless system. But the guy below you, he's a direct threat. He might be hungry next month when you're on the bottom. He might be the one trying to steal your croquette.
So as long as the oppressed are fighting horizontally, as long as they dedicate all their energy and violence toward each other,
The vertical structure of oppression remains completely secure. It's unchallenged, and it's untouched. The administration doesn't need to lift a single finger. They just set the conditions, ensure maximum volatility and distrust, and the inmates take care of the rest. They self-manage their own extinction. It's a masterpiece of cynical, hierarchical control.
and that leads us to the source of that control. Layer 4, level 0, and the banality of evil. We have to leave the blood and the chaos of the pit for a moment and ascend to the systemic, thoughtless horror maintained by the administration.
Level 0, the kitchen. Its depiction is it's a textbook chilling application of Hannah Arendt's concept of the banality of evil.
Explain that.
What we see there is military discipline, obsessive detail, and this cold aesthetic perfection, which is fundamentally moral blindness in action.
The head chef is obsessing over a single hair on a panna cotta.
Right.
Or he's meticulously debating the precise serving temperature of a snail delicacy while people are literally engaging in murder and cannibalism 300 levels below him.
The obsession with the flawless execution of the product stands in this horrific, almost comical contrast to the moral reality of its consumption.
Arendt described the banality of evil as thoughtlessness.
Yes, a function of bureaucratic detachment, an inability or a flat-out refusal to think from the standpoint of someone else. The kitchen staff are not cackling sadists with twisted mustaches.
No.
They are simply doing their jobs, focused entirely on the metric of perfection for the platform's meal.
Their focus is just fragmented. It's compartmentalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are paid to make the escargot flawless, to ensure the wine glasses are polished to a mirror shine. They're not paid to consider that their food is triggering a bloodbath on level 40. The responsibility is so thoroughly fragmented across the entire hierarchy, the cook, the server, the quality control manager, that no single individual feels accountable for the mass murder they are facilitating.
It's the genius of modern bureaucracy, isn't it? The ultimate defense against complicity.
Every single cog in that vertical machine can sincerely believe, I just make the food, or I just check the temperature. They insulate their personal moral compass from the sheer scale of the organization's atrocity.
And then we have Imogweri. We talked about her idealism, but she serves as the system's conscience, or maybe more accurately, the system's willful blindness.
She is the perfect representation of the willfully blind middle manager. She benefits from the system while constructing this self-serving narrative to justify her participation.
She worked as an interviewer at Level 0, facilitating this whole process for 25 years before she entered the pit herself.
And she admits she didn't know the true depth of the pit. She believed it stopped at 200 levels. And crucially, she claimed total ignorance about the existence of children in the system.
Her entire philosophical position, this belief in spontaneous solidarity after a career spent facilitating the structure, it was a defense mechanism, a shield to protect her from acknowledging her own complicity.
She had to convince herself that the prisoners only needed a gentle push toward goodness, rather than acknowledging that the structure itself made goodness a practical impossibility.
And when she finally sees the pit for what it is, she can't survive that cognitive dissonance. Her suicide is the collapse of that bureaucratic defense. She realizes her neutral job was actually an act of mass murder facilitation.
She can't reconcile the reality of the violence with the comfortable, self-serving story she told herself for 2 decades at Level 0.
And Level 0 doesn't just manage the food, they expertly manage the illusion of choice. The illusion of consent.
The interview process.
The interview process. Choose your favorite dish. Choose your personal item. Enter voluntarily, maybe for a diploma, a cure for a disease, or a large sum of money.
This whole process is a profound critique of how consent is manufactured. It gives the prisoners the illusion of hospitality, the illusion of autonomy. It makes them stakeholders in their own incarceration.
And this mirrors so perfectly how modern capitalism frames coerced labor or necessity-driven consumption or essential servitude as a free choice that you willingly signed up for.
And the result is the administration can then wash its hands of all the violence. They maintain a perfect moral distance. They can argue implicitly, you chose to be here, you chose your dish, you are responsible for your own fate.
Well, violence isn't our fault.
It's the fault of the greedy prisoners who failed to choose the moral path. The system is perfect. It's the people who are flawed. And that bureaucratic logic is the final thoughtless layer of this horror. And this meticulous dissection of structure and compliance, it has to lead us to our final section. Section V, the eschatology of the void.
Right.
This is where the political allegory gives way to something almost theological and ultimately deeply, deeply depressing. It's the crushing finality of what you call the closed-loop theory.
The climax of both films hinges on the same event, really. The discovery of the child at level 333, the absolute, ignored, forgotten bottom of the pit.
An impossibility.
An impossibility. The administration denies the existence of children, so the child represents an absolute anomaly, a glitch in the system, a symbol of pure, unconditional innocence existing where the structure claimed life couldn't possibly survive.
And Goring and Baharat, they initially believed that the panna cotta, the perfectly preserved dessert, is the message.
A symbolic rejection of greed.
Right. But then they realized the panna cotta, because it's a menu item, it still serves the system's internal logic. The child, however, utterly defies the system. The child is living proof that the system's own rules, no one under 16, no children exist here, are lies.
So sending the child up on the platform, it becomes this profound, almost theological act.
It's an ascension.
It's an ascension. It's a plea to the gods, the administration at level 0, to finally recognize the humanity of their subjects. It signifies that innocence, the human spirit, can somehow survive even the most brutal conditioning and architecture. It's the only chance for hope, or at least for recognition.
The prequel twist, which is confirmed by the source material, is the final devastating blow to that hope. The revelation that Platform 2 happened first. Perempuin saves a boy. And then the system collapses into chaos, only to be followed by Goring's arrival and the saving of the girl in the platform.
So this is the definitive closed-loop implication. If the boy from Platform 2 successfully ascended on the platform, and yet the system was still functioning brutally and perfectly when Goring arrived, maybe months, maybe years later, what happened to that first message?
It means the message from the first child, the boy, was either not received by the administration or, and this is so much worse,
It was received and ignored.
it was received, categorized as an error, and deliberately ignored. The system simply reset and continued its brutal cycle. The administration doesn't care about a child or a message. They care about the structural perfection of their experiment.
So the message failed politically. The chefs at level 0, the ones obsessed with a hair on a dessert, they likely saw the child not as humanity recognized, but as an operational disruption.
A biological irregularity, something to be disposed of, or just returned to the cycle. The recurring imagery we see of children playing on a slide, fighting to reach the top only to be thrown back into the pit, it suggests that the pit is an inevitable destination for humanity.
So, after all that, what does this all mean? We have reached the bottom of this deep dive, and the synthesis is, it's bleak.
It's bleak.
The pit is not a metaphor for a possible future. It's an inevitable destination for humanity, given the current structural design of our global hierarchies. The comparison between the two films proves the fundamental futility of political extremes.
Order, enforced by the loyalists of Platform 2, breeds tyranny. It breeds mutilation and the crushing of the individual, all in the name of purity. That's the fascist horror.
And chaos, bred by the monthly volatility and the enforced self-interest in the platform, that breeds gluttony, savagery, and the crushing of the weak. That's the horror of late-stage capitalism and pure anarchy.
And the result is structurally identical. The individual is consumed and the structure endures.
The problem isn't the people. The people are just responding rationally to the insane rules they've been given. The problem is the pit itself. So neither the knife of Hobbesian survival, nor the book of Rousseauian idealism, nor the law of Robespierre's purity can solve the problem. The problem is the architecture. It's the verticality.
As long as that vertical, hierarchical structure exists, violence, desperation, and lateral conflict are the only possible guaranteed outcomes. And to close out this incredibly cynical analysis, I think we should bring back one minor detail that summarizes the absolute insignificance of the prisoners from the perspective of level zero.
Okay.
We have to analyze the symbolism of the snail, the escargot.
It's just a dish. It's meticulously prepared by the level zero chefs, a
Yes.
delicacy that can't be disturbed by a single hair.
But the biological reality of the snail is what matters here. It is slow, it's hermaphroditic, and it carries its burden on its back. To the chefs, it's just a menu item. But to the prisoner, it's a metaphor for their own existence.
Ah.
The snail represents the fragility of the prisoners. They are creatures of burden, meticulously prepared for slaughter, consumed by the system, and ultimately completely insignificant to the administration above.
The administration obsesses over the preparation of the dish, but they are completely indifferent to the life or the death of the consumer below. That structural indifference, the banality of that evil, that's the final crushing horror.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to explore as you walk away from this deep dive. If the pit is the problem, if the architecture of verticality is the fundamental issue that guarantees failure, what violent act, physical or structural, is required to change the architecture of our own society? And are we capable of carrying out that kind of fundamental change without immediately becoming Dagen Bobby, the Robespierre of the pit? The cycle seems to demand a sacrifice, but every attempted solution so far only ends in tyranny or savagery. What is the third way?